Welcome to a Wide Flank Game Club episode. This month we played Wave Race 64.
This month,
yeah, 1996.
This past 2 months.
This past 30 years. A 1996 jet ski racing game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It was the first post-launch release for the N64.
Oh,
the
yeah.
third game. Remember when games, they were so infrequent that it was like, this is the third game.
Remember when games, there were only 3 of them?
Yeah, there were 3 at one time.
You had Mario, you had Pilot Wings, and then there was a game called Wave Race.
Came out.
Yeah, and you were happy for it. You went upstairs in the snow both ways.
Yes.
And you were happy to find Wave Race 64 sitting at the top of those stairs.
At the Toys R Us.
Toilets R Us.
I want to start with the announcer. I think it's a fun way to kick off the episode.
Let's go!
I mean, is he the best announcer? Is he the best announcer in video game history?
The man rocks. So hold on. Let me pull real quick. I should have had this offhand.
I came at you, without you knowing where I was going to go.
That's true. Welcome to another episode of Wide Flank, where Alon's always messing with me.
John, sneaky surprises.
Sneaky. We're having fun. What is a video game but a pile of surprises left to be untangled by the gamer? Answer that question, Alon?
No. That was just like word garbage to get you to the links that you're opening or something like that.
I am not vamping. The man's name is John Hulaton, and he's a man that moved to Japan to be a professional musician, but then his friends told him he was a good announcer, so he started applying to...
The nicest ever way to say you're a shitty musician is like, dude, you could do a voiceover.
What about your voice though, brother?
The God's instrument, dude. Stop playing guitar.
But yeah, no, his friends were like, you're a good announcer, and he started going for VO jobs. He got pulled into Nintendo. Every piece of VO you hear in Wave Race 64, we're getting right into it, huh?
Yeah.
Every piece of VO that you hear in Wave Race 64 was recorded in an hour and a half. They booked him for
so sick.
They booked it. It's this is how it happens, folks. You think these video games are special little gems because you played them when you were 6? No, they are special gems. We love them. But the point is that they booked him for 3 hours and then they banged it out in an hour and a half. And on top of that, they had him record some VO for Mario Kart 64 as well and didn't pay him for it.
Did they use it? I can
neither confirm nor deny.
I'm just wondering what the script looked like, because my man is just screaming and or being really condescending sometimes.
Let me tell you.
That was weak. And you're just like, okay. And
nice try.
But then you hear maximum power, and you're like, let's fucking go.
Yeah, I mean, the range of intensity on
yeah.
I mean, we're getting into the game basically.
It's so hype, though.
It's a hype game. I don't want to get into the game yet because I want to dump all the knowledge I've gleaned from the interview I listened to.
With the announcer. Yeah.
Because we got all day to talk about the game. We got all day to talk about how they divided the triangles to render the waves.
You still haven't answered my question, though. Is he the greatest announcer in video games? Because I could only think of, I think the obvious 2 that came to mind are Unreal Tournament and Halo, that are both really famous.
The Halo
double kill, or
Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
The Halo guy's pretty iconic. How does the Unreal guy go? He goes
dominating.
Dominating?
Yeah. It's the same shit as Halo now that I think about it.
It doesn't stick in my mind.
He also goes double kill. It's the same shit. Or maybe I'm confusing one for the other, but
possibly.
Yeah.
The shooters,
the shooters, there's not that much to announce other than who you're killing.
Those bullets are going good.
There's fatality in Mortal Kombat.
Babality. Wait, no, I was thinking of a genuine one. Let me take a sip of Diet Coke here. We're not sponsored by Diet Coke.
Only other one that I can think of is this SNES game I loved, and me and my friend Vito used to play all the time, called Smash TV.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
So that is literally the premise of the game is you're literally on a game show from the future. And so there's always a guy going like, good luck, you'll need it and stuff like that. But man, the announcer is so sick in Wave Race.
Yeah, no, it's like a very specific, it's like an iconic sort of texture. And I think like this is to get real about it, because we're here to have a good time, but we're also here to get real. It's a game that is like the texture of it is so like immediately recognizable and like feels timeless in a way. Like you look at this game, Wave Race 64. Hey, listener, if you don't know what Wave Race 64 is, it's a jet ski game for the Nintendo.
It's a jet ski racing game. There's nothing else to say, right? But it's so much more than that.
So much more. And it's I think like the thing that feels timeless about it is like the texture of it and like the movement of it. Like it's not the graphics. I'm not talking about the graphics. Yeah. But it's like you think about like a vocal performance of an actor as something that like can sort of rise above like when it was recorded. Like you listen to an actor from like 1940, you know they're from the 40s. You listen to an actor from the 1990s, you can even know that an actor from the 1990s is from the 1990s. But you listen to a voice actor from 1990s in the context of a jet ski game, and it's like so specific that it's like, yeah, dude. Like,
yeah. And the point of me asking you who's the best announcer or what's the best announcer in a game is that like, other than racing games, it's hard for me to imagine an announcer not just being like really annoying. Like I can't imagine. Or hype. Like I can't play like a single player like adventure game and there's an announcer. I can't play like a fighting game or something. You know, like I guess, you know, other than like fatality or like the beginning of the fight, they're not like nice punch. You know, like it doesn't make sense. But like you get this feedback from the announcer through every second of the race, every mistake you do, everything good you do, everything bad you do, everything the other racers are doing, you're just getting that all the time.
Yeah, is that how it occurs like in the game? Like it like throughout the race, like as you're messing up, like it's constantly telling you when you've like lost power and like other like,
there's those that are like things. Really queued up for like, oh, you're you know, you fucked up, and that's obvious. But there's also just like everybody's behind you when you like take the lead, or like you know, smoking, you know, just hype. You just did a fucking backflip for no reason other than to show off. And
you're doing it's like
there's 10 different okays.
okay.
Just like all kinds of shit.
Sure. Oh, this is what I was going to say earlier. You asked like did you ask like how much of the script was there, or like it was some
I was
question.
just asking like, what did the script like look like? Is it just all caps?
I just want
like what goes beyond all caps? There's only regular cap and big cap, and you can't.
It's not to keep harping on the like little bit of research that I did some research.
I want you to hear. I want to hear about it.
Hey, you want to hear about it?
Yeah.
The dude said that like he was like, they booked me for 3 hours and they gave me 16 pages of dialogue, and I was like, you really think
that's
3 hours? But then in the interview he also was like, but it was triple spaced, so you know it was.
So there's like one page has like
nice job!
And smoking on it.
Here's an actual relevant thing. They wanted 5 takes of every line.
Interesting.
So it's like I think like they probably had a list of the lines that we hear that are like, nice try. Yeah. Or like, you move on to the next race.
And like, did it.
You just have to like sell that 5 different ways for like the developers to use.
That's sick.
But yeah, no, like with regards to, like, I was going to also point out the fact that you're talking about announcers, and like an announcer is a different thing from a narrator, right? Like an announcer exists somewhat within the reality of the game, which I think is like especially relevant to like a racing game or a sport game or an Unreal Tournament, which is like, this is what the fucked up sport of the future is. Like, there's like something of a narrative conceit to the presence of the announcer in Wave Race.
What's the game Stanley's
Parable?
Yeah, like that's an announcer, I guess.
That's cheeky. That's like, isn't that a game that's like, let me tell you about what a video game is?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But it is an announcer, I think, because he's just like, hey, don't do that. Or like, I don't know. He's like talking to you and reacting to your actions as opposed to narrating a story.
Without having played the Stanley Parable, I'll say that like my understanding of it is like it's an announcer that like is part, like it's like it's part of the game world. Like it's
maybe
it's like
different.
part of the experience in a way.
Because you wouldn't call the Portal companion or Portal 2 companion an announcer. Yeah, it's just another character in the game.
Yes.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, okay.
That you're like interfacing with in a POV way. So maybe there is something about like I think I think you're right to invoke the Stanley Parable because it is like it's somewhere in between the game and you as player. Because like GLaDOS in Portal is like very much like, I'm a robot. Welcome to this facility where I, a robot, live.
Yeah.
Whereas like in Wave Race, it's just like, go!
Like,
it's not. It doesn't. It's not like welcome to the course. Like it's just sort of. It's like assumed, kind of. I think we've talked about this a little bit on the pod before. Of like information in a game that's like of the world, kind of, or like. No, I lost the thread a little bit, but I think about it more in terms of like sports games or like. Go off.
It's weird. It's just a weird. It's just a weird. I'm realizing just talking it out now with you. It's like it's kind of a weird POV because it's like traditional sports games are really just pretending that it's sports on TV. That's the role of commentators, right? It's like John Madden has like canned responses based on what you do, as if you're playing a real NFL game and John Madden the TV commentator, which also is different, right? Like the announcer in Wave Race thinks that this is the real world. Like, does that make any sense? Like, I'm getting way too deep, but like,
well, no, that's kind of the point.
Announcer's is world. Like, it's not like pretending to be an announcer. Like
in the Stanley Parable. So to use Stanley Parable, Wave Race, and John Madden as like the spectrum of announcers. In the Stanley Parable, my understanding is it's just like Stanley walks down the hallway, and that's like, and like
kind of,
it's like really, it's like cheeky and engaging with the player in terms of like, how do you define that tone? Like it's of the world, but like knows that you know, right?
Yeah,
like,
I don't know what to call that, but it is more of a narrator because you were saying before the difference between a narrator and an announcer. It's a narrator that also reacts to you like doing or not doing the things that it says to do, right? Like it'll be like, and then you made a left and you make a right. And it's like, I said make a left, and it's like a bad thing happens. It's like
it's communicating very directly with the player, but not in the way that like a John Madden canned response is like reacting to player agency, but not in a way that's like about the game. It's about. Or like about the player, it's more like about the logistics of the game itself.
Yeah. It's sort of like, this is what John Madden might say in a real NFL game situation. Yeah. Whereas Wave Race is all the way on the other end of the spectrum, which is just like, Wave Race is real, and I'm reacting to Wave Race. I'm not pretending to, react
like whether
to like,
you're... It's the Wave Race announcer doesn't care that you're there. They're just like yelling at you, kind of like,
and they're not pretending that it's jet ski race on ESPN. Well, like that doesn't exist in the. The only jet ski racing that exists is Wave Race 64. We're getting so fucking deep in the weeds, but I love it.
Did we talk about this on the GLHF? Like the notion of like, is jet ski racing an actual
You did.
sport?
I think you did. And I think my response was, is racing the first sport? And I did not find the answer to either of those.
The racing, the first sport, the locomotion of the human body. Like, I mean, it's easy to like imagine cave paintings. It's easy to imagine cave paintings.
What?
It's easy to imagine like just like a very guttural, like visceral, immediate human. Like, of course, people were racing back in the day.
It's like, people could run, and then it's like, I'm gonna run there before you get there. It's like, we're racing now.
Maybe that's the complicated notion of before you get there. Like, running is one thing, chasing the buffalo is one thing.
Yeah,
but like, I got there before you did. Is like, maybe like, is that complex or is that simple?
There was a famous cave painting that says the last one to the buffalo is a rotten egg. Funny.
We'll
but
yeah,
I don't know. Racing
after these
first
messages.
Sport, maybe. First competition, maybe. I don't know. It's cool.
First competition. Well, there's no ball.
It's the easiest one to. It's the most natural sort of competition there is because we were always running.
It's pure body, and like Wave Race 64 differentiates itself from the races of the cave people. By virtue of the fact that like Wave Race 64 is a game that's very much occupied with like the vehicle of the jet ski. Like it's like it's not about the jet ski. It's about the waves. Are we in agreement upon this that like the game is like 80% waves?
I actually don't agree, but I want you to finish.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree. I have a note on this. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going. Or you want me to go?
Go. You don't agree.
I think the game is about the joystick.
Oh,
I think it's the best joystick game I've ever played. The best joystick feeling, the most in tune with a joystick. And that's what makes it feel so fucking good and unique. And that's sort of like where it came from in my theory. Like, you know, I think N64 was the first console that had a joystick or, you know, whatever, play stick, whatever people call it, on the console controller. And there wasn't really any games sort of Pilot Wings that really took advantage of it. Like Pilot Wings, you're flying around, but you could do that on a D-pad. Like you could do Pilot Wings on a D-pad. But Wave Race, it just uses the stick in a way that other racing games don't. I mean, in other racing games that I've played, I mean, all you do is sort of left, right. I'm not saying other games are easy or simple, but it's sort of just the x-axis in terms of like how you move.
And it's like an on-off process.
On-off, and you're
sensitivity of direction becomes a going concern like 20 years after. Or
the sensitivity and the balance of like acceleration and deceleration and that stuff while you're turning is everything. But this game has XY axis where you sort of slowly, gradually turn left or right. It also has y-axis where you point the nose of the jet ski up and down, which no other racing game I've played has, just straight up. Where like
physical,
like if you want to hit a big jump, you can point your nose up, and if you want to go under a fucking object, you can land and point your nose down and go underwater for a second, or just land better. That's insane. Yeah. Like
I'm already continue.
Okay,
I'm chomping at the bit to affirm what you're saying, but
no, I mean you can jump in whatever, but like way that just those two, and I think there's still more to it, but just those two, the way it affects a racing game is like right and back versus and left and back both slows you down and makes your turn much sharper because you're pulling up and yanking your jet skiing to the side in a way that, like, again, like other games, it's like you would like pull the e-brake and decelerate, and like it's hard and cool and everything in those games, but it's not just the stick. And this game is like really, you can hold accelerate through this entire thing and still slow yourself down to like a 90-degree turn because of how you move the stick.
And I was sort of joking before when I was saying like the difference between cave paintings and this is like the jet ski is outside the body, but it's like truly like this game is about like using the stick to manipulate I mean, you are manipulating the human body, but you're manipulating how the human body interacts with this fucking device.
Yes.
This big, heavy thing that's beneath you. And before I forget to say it, like I had a huge aha moment in the game where I played through a championship run. I like got first place or whatever. And then like I was like trying to learn some other stuff about the game. And I played through the warm-up section. And the notion that you hold down on the stick to turn more tightly, I like couldn't stop thinking about that. Not like in a given race, because in a given race, it's like you deploy that when you need to. It's like part of your toolkit. But philosophically, as a design choice, I couldn't stop thinking about it because I was like, that is so much subtlety to like, it's not just left and right. It's like left and right. And also like, how much am I like pushing down to like jerk my jet ski? And like, this is something I wanted to say about the game too, is that like the game feels very much about like jerking the game around. Like you're getting jerked around, but also you can jerk some stuff around.
Yeah.
Like it's and I think that's like emblem, like, and I could go on and on about that, but I want to stay on the stick for a while because like, I think you're right that like this is a game that comes out of Nintendo learning how to make games for a stick in a way that's like, what's the point? What's the purpose of 3D? What's the purpose of this stick that we're like granting players access to? Like, what are we doing really? Because it's very easy to look at like Mario 64 and be like, wow, he goes all over the place now. He didn't used to do that, but Wave Race 64
and all that stuff. Yeah, but it's like again, like you don't really need the joystick.
I've played Mario 64 on a D-pad, and like it's fine. Yeah.
Like
it's different, but it's different,
fine. But like it's fine. Yeah,
it's more like it's and to that point, like Wave Race 64 is a very directional game. Like it's not like an open, free form, like do whatever you want with the stick. The stick is in the service of the forward momentum and like the pathway.
A lot of this game, maybe all of this game, we'll see by the end of the podcast, is just like how good it fucking feels. And I think that a big part of how good and unique it feels is the uniqueness of controlling essentially everything through the joystick. I mean, I basically never let go of accelerate. And then everything else you do is with the joystick. That's it. It's like, that is just no other racing game is really like that. I mean, sure, you could say like arcade games and a steering wheel, but even a steering wheel is still XY axis. That's all it is.
Yeah. It's like what percentage of the x-axis are you? Yeah. Like it's a 180 mechanism.
Exactly.
Like Wave Race 64 is like a truly 360 input centric game. And so like you feel the subtlety of like literally any point in the controller that you're utilizing, like you do feel it. And like you're able to parse out, the player is able to parse out like what has changed. Like, even as you're like confused as fuck because like a wave surprised you and you're like, you're battling it. But it's, I don't want to run completely off the. I feel like we could keep talking about the stick, you know, but I do
I still have more stuff on the stick because I mean, there's just this relationship that I was connecting with between me and the character on the jet ski, the character themselves and the jet ski itself. And then the jet ski and the waves in the water. And it's all separate. Like there's times where you're locked in a line and you're going to thread the needle between all the buoys.
Yeah, dude, when you can see two buoys and you're like, I just have to.
And in those moments, you subtly tap left or right on the joystick to just literally move the human a little bit to the side of the buoys to like sort of bounce off them, but keep your momentum. You're not even moving the jet ski. And then there's those other times where you're like making a fucking like 240 degree U-turn and you literally are like in the air, yanking your jet ski completely L-shaped so that when you land, you're going to fucking whole body's going to pull over to the other side. And it's like, that's fucking wild. Like, that's a crazy tactile thing that this game has that, like, I'm just not a racing game guy at all.
Okay. And do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like,
yeah, I've just never been into the genre, really. Like, I don't really like Mario Kart. I don't really like realistic racing games. I've just never really been the kind of game that I'm attracted to, but there's just something incredible about the feeling of this game.
I mean, it's as much as I was starting to say that it's like this game, like all the stick work does serve like a pretty linear, like you gotta race. It's in the name of the game, for goodness sake.
It's a wave race.
It's not a wave game. But truly, like, I do think of this game as like the racing is kind of secondary to the like moment to moment interaction between, like you were saying, like player, vehicle, and water. Like the race is like it's just like a construct that like gives you a purpose to wrangle all the stuff. And like as I was playing it, I started to wonder, like, is there some potential for a game that is like this type of physical maneuvering, but not like a linear racing game? Like, is there?
Yeah, I have one. It's called Rocket League.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, like the tilting and the full, you know, physics sandbox feeling of Rocket League wouldn't exist without wave race. I don't think, you know, like, and that is like when you're locked in that game, you have complete, you know, 3D control of the space in your car and how you land and how you turn and all that stuff matters a lot.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said there, though, because
I believe it.
In the moment to moment, you're right. It doesn't feel like a racing game. You're really just like battling the waves and you're just like fucking buoy and like you're locked in, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it's sort of a pure racing game. There's no real other thing that the game cares about. Like, there's a stunt mode and it's kind of fun, but like
stunt mode is like an interpretation of the race mode.
Yeah,
it's like
you still have to
go through these rings that like
make
you might
time.
You might not have drove exactly there.
Yeah, and then stunts in the actual races are cool, but it's purely to show off.
It's fun.
It's actually a disadvantage, probably. You go slower, you could fall. Like, you shouldn't do it, or you may not advance in the race.
Yeah,
and
totally.
The other thing that I noticed when I was researching is speedruns are literally just racing well.
Just like mastering
speed runs of Wave Race 64 are just fucking. I rode the perfect line at the max speed and I turned perfectly. It's like a fucking F1 game. The speed run for an F1 game and Wave Race are the same. It's like I just had a fucking clean lap.
I know
so
my
interesting
lines.
because it's like you think of other speedrun games, like especially like by Nintendo and of this era. It's like Mario Kart or something. It's like, oh, you like drive over the mountain and skip the entire level, or like go through the floor to reach this castle or something. And Wave Race is just like, no, it's a racing game. Pure, unadulterated, what is that word?
Unadulterated
racing game.
Can you confirm that like in Wave Race speedrunning, there isn't like heavy glitch shit? It's more just
no
like,
glitch shit.
I fucking nailed this run.
The only like main tech that I saw, because I watched a few speedrun things. Well, there's two main techs. One is tapping B. Like you tap B constantly.
Why?
In speedruns.
What?
It makes it makes like your butt like bob up and down and like stay more steady and reach a higher max speed.
Okay.
And you have to stop tapping when you hit jumps and stop tapping when you sharp turn.
That seems
so that's not even like a bug or anything. It's just like this is like the optimal way to reach top speed.
Sure.
And the other one isn't even is sort of the same. It's just like a racing thing. It's like when you hit a jump, you have to tilt your nose back down to like land better and lose less speed
and keep the momentum. Yeah, it's not about breaking the game. It's about like fully cultivating the mechanics of the game.
And it was just unbelievable to see speedruns like that for a game and an era and a machine where I'm like, really? There's no like bug where you like go under the whole level and beat it in
like
5 seconds?
Under some of the geometry.
And the answer is just like, no, that's not what wave race speedruns are about.
Well, I think like as like wild, I don't want to take the magic away from this game, and I don't think you can, because playing this game is one thing. Like understanding this game is a different thing.
Yeah.
But I will say that like the way that the waves operate in the game, like when we were first looking at the game, like for GLHF, like early on, I was like, are the waves randomized? Like
they're not.
What? Yeah, they're not randomized. They have like a pretty rigid like pattern to them, and they only generate in proximity to the player and at like different triggered points on a given
that makes sense
map. And like I'm only invoking that because it's like that kind of clocks with the notion that it's like, yeah, you can't really manipulate the waves that much because they are part of this doesn't matter, because as you're like playing the game, like you're not able to really parse out like that's the same rhythm of the wave.
Yeah.
Nice try.
Only when it's like a specific jump or a specific shortcut. That's the only time where like I'm pretty sure there's a wave coming and it comes and you hit the jump, you know?
Yeah. There's like I forget which course it is, but there's one specific wave where you can like jump over the rock. Like
right at the beginning.
And it's you sort of have to
Marine
trust,
Fortress? Is that what it is?
It might be Marine Fortress for sure. And before we'll come back to Drake Lake later.
Oh my god.
Drake Lake is a fascinating, it's like a rebuff of what is Wave Race. But in the Mechanical Fortress one, but I think the actual point I want to make though is that like, because the waves are as rigid as they are, like maybe you can't mess with them too much. Like you can't manipulate it. Like as like abstract and like chance oriented as the game feels, it is an extremely tight game. Like it doesn't break. Like it's So like I'm honestly, now that like I'm thinking about it, and I don't know what I'm talking about, because it's like what makes a game privy to glitches and speedrun tricks and things like that. Like it's every game has that stuff. But like
I was curious to ask you, because you're such a Nintendo baby, much more than I am, where this doesn't feel like a Nintendo game to me.
Totally. It's wild that this is like an internally developed Nintendo game for sure.
It just feels like this is Sega and this was, made for Dreamcast or something like that. And that's like the lineage of the game and the way it looks and the way it feels. And also like I was thinking, because I was trying to get first place on every map on expert, and I don't think I ever got there.
Good luck. I never even finished the championship on hard.
Oh yeah.
I tried.
I was balling out, but I got the expert.
Good, huh?
Yeah, I got good. But expert's really fucking hard still, even when you know like tap B and all this kind of shit. But the reason I bring it up is like you can just fall off your jet ski and you just fucking lose.
You're done.
And that does not feel very Nintendo to me, right? Like the equivalent of Mario Kart is I fall off the level and then I get like the lightning item and kill everyone and catch up in the race. Like, because it's Nintendo and you always have a chance to win and there's a comeback mechanic and shit. This game is just like, oh, you didn't get enough points on the third level. You have to start the entire circuit over.
This is a little bit of a pivot into talking about how like the point system works in the game, which I don't think like, I think everything you're saying makes sense, that like, it's like, this is a harder edged game than Nintendo tends to put out. But I mean, that's a whole conversation unto itself, which we will get to. We got time, folks. But what I want to say right now about the point system in the game is that like there is a certain amount of flexibility to the point system, at least on like normal and hard, that I found like pretty interesting, which is like I was racing on hard the other night and it was like I kept coming in last, but I was still like scraping by, because the way that the game works is it tells you like you must at the end of a given race, you're awarded a different amount of points given on whether you come in first, second, third, or fourth.
Yeah.
And for every given race, it communicates to the player you need this amount of points to move on to the next race.
Yeah.
And it doesn't care how you do within a given race. It's just like, as long as you got enough points, it's okay, bro. So you can come in first on the first race and then like come in last over and over.
Yeah.
And then by like the 5th race, it's like, okay, like you're still in it, but like you have to come in first now.
Yeah.
And if you don't, bye-bye. Like, and I found that, like, I don't think that's like an example of like Nintendo catch-up design. I just found it as like a fascinating piece of design of like how flexible, like where is the flexibility? Sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah, the point system. No, I was just
the point system.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's because I'm opening up to a bigger topic of like, where does the flexibility in this game live? Like, where is this game rigid and where is it flexible? And I think like when you start to ask questions like that, it's like the game has a bunch of different answers, honestly. And I could keep going, but
I was stuck on the buoys too.
Buoys?
I think that the buoys, there's yellow buoys with an L on them that you have to go to the left of, and red buoys with an R on them you have to go to the right of.
R is for red.
R is for red and right. And I was thinking, like, what would this game be like without the buoys? And I think it would just like not work. Like, I think, like, I don't know, for some reason it just needs that extra little bit of like navigating obstacles.
Yeah.
And therefore,
more in the
like,
short term.
Yeah, because then you're also like fighting with the waves and the other racers. And if it didn't have that, I just think it would be sort of like a bland racing game where you're just like, oh yeah, like looks kind of cool, but like you figure it out and it's easy, or you go this one path and you're uninterrupted and you just go to first place easily or something. Or there's like that type of racing game where like the CPU is always like faster than you, and I don't like that kind of racing game either, where it's just like I have to like do something above and beyond what the CPU is doing in order to win.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like the buoys make it like a constant wrestle with Mother Nature and like with your jet ski and your character.
Yeah, it brings the jet ski, because like, I really like the framework that we're talking about it with as like player, like human, machine, nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Man. And it's like the buoys sort of like force you to contend with like the relationship between machine and nature. Like,
yes.
Yeah, totally. I hear that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then there's a bonus to it too, which like sort of like the when I think of like the buoys, again, as much as we talk about like is jet ski racing a real sport? I don't know. But I'll tell you what is a real sport is slalom. Is like skiing. And so when I think about the buoys in Wave Race 64, I think about like how slalom skiing is oriented, which is like you need to go through these flags. Like you need to like nail this right and left. Well, is slalom right and left flags, or is it like the two flags side by side and you have to go through them? Do you know?
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. Yeah.
It might be two different variations.
I think it is right and left, though. I think they're like different color flags.
But then what's the skiing that has two flags that you got to go through?
I don't know.
Neither here nor there.
Either way, slalom skiing also wouldn't really be a sport if it didn't have the flags. Just like Wave Race 64 wouldn't really be a game without the buoys.
Yeah, it'd be just cruising down the mountain, which like I've
it would just be
that.
Like
it feels stupid.
This would just be like a part of a Zelda game instead of like its own like racing game. Totally. If it didn't have the buoys and the circuit and stuff like that.
It's like it lends like a certain level of sophistication. Like Wave Race 64, I think is like a sophisticated system.
It's like, crazy how many games we've both played and everyone listening has played since then. And I swear I can't think of a game that's as visceral a connection between like the controller and me and what I'm watching on the screen as wave
Sure.
race. Like as soon as I play it, I was like blown away by that. Like as I'm getting better, I'm just like, oh my God, like buffering my jet ski jerk to the perfect millisecond. And so I'm
like tapping,
going around one buoy while already turning the jet ski to get ready to go around the next buoy. Like, it just feels unreal, dude.
It's a mixture of thinking about like the short term and the long term.
Yeah.
Like I think at all times, and the long term that we're talking about is not like where are the other racers.
Yeah.
It's more just like what do I need to deal with in like 30 feet kind of.
Yeah, because
like,
it's also an old machine. Like you can't even see that far. Like you can't see far away. You just see like 2 buoys away, and then it's like fuck a right, and you just like fucking yank the whole thing to the right.
Yeah. You have to react to the waves and to the buoys.
Yeah.
And even in the stunt mode, it's like you have to react to where. Again, I don't want to talk about the stunt mode too much. Like the stunt mode kind of bums me out because it does feel like, I mean, I like that you get points for the tricks that you do. I like that there's a game design mechanism that's like, do all the tricks you can.
And then ride the dolphin. Yeah.
Ride the dolphin. Truly, my like first and biggest take on the game, I think, which I might have talked about it in the GLHF, but I'm just going to say it again, is like, I wish Dolphin Park was an entire game. And for the listener that like hasn't played the game as such, Dolphin Park is the like, it's kind of an open-ended exploratory space where the game is telling you like, push left and right on the thumbstick to do a barrel roll. Follow that dolphin. And like, it's got all this, like,
warm up and follow that dolphin.
it's this warm up mode, so you can just get used to the feeling of it, but it's not really built out into like a significant game mode with like a point system.
Yeah, I think like half of the time I spent before the GLHF episode was in warm up mode. I was just doing fucking handstands. I was riding the course standing on my fucking handlebar,
because it's fun to explore this space with these mechanics, but like the game is not interested in that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna add to that like I hate using the words like bad and good. I was gonna say like the graphics are bad, but what I mean is just like it's really old looking and
the graphics are good.
The graphics are actually sick, but what I mean is like the characters are really old and dated. Their legs are just like a fucking French fry, and it's like barely attached to their weird butts.
They're very chunky, but at the same time, when you end up on like the podium at the end of the game, I remember like looking at their faces, and I was like, these faces are pretty well
the
detailed.
Faces aren't bad, but the reason I bring that up is because the animations for the tricks are sick.
Yeah,
like the handstand is like really cool and looks like really good like motion capture animation.
So I don't want to like not armchair designer, but it's because like there isn't much like primary source material on the development of this game. One thing I was able to confirm from reading an interview with director Shinya Takahashi is that like Nintendo brought in motion capture tech like as development on this game was ending. Like motion capture technology was utilized in the design of 1080 snowboard. I'm just going to talk about 1080 snowboarding and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Yep.
Both of which Shinya Takahashi, who is like the director on this game, he's credited on 1080 as motion capture, and he's credited on Ocarina of Time as mocap system director. So like, I think like literally through working on Wave Race, it was like, you know what? I don't want an armchair story. Like this isn't factual. I don't have a first, but like what I've been able to intuit from like an interview with the guy where he's like, and then we brought in a mocap machine.
Yeah. I saw that. I think I saw the same interview. Go ahead.
I think, but I think what I want to invoke is like maybe the notion that like working on this game was like, you know what would make rendering the human body easier? The human body, because this is a game that is very much like concerned with like the human body and how it moves and how it maneuvers things and how like it navigates nature, it's not to get too highfalutin about it. And I think just by virtue of the fact that the director of this game would go on to like specifically work on motion capture in like later 3D games, like I think it's like pretty apparent that like what he was concerned with was like, how do we render the human body
and
more
that's
accurately
basically
or more gamely?
Why Takahashi was even brought to Nintendo at all was, I mean, this is a quote. He said, "It was my first step really into game development. The reason I wound up on Wave Race was because of my work in 3D graphics. It all started sitting down with these engineers who only had experience with the Famicom and Super Famicom and the 2D graphics there. We just plopped an SGI, Silicon Graphics machine in front of them and sat down and said, how are we going to make something with this?" And so it was this like, just what an incredible moment of time going from 2D to 3D, right? Like just like in video games and in everything. It's just like unbelievable. But there were apparently Miyamoto, the story that Takahashi told later in that thing was that Miyamoto was like walking by a programmer working on a tech demo.
Making like a water demo.
Water tech demo. And he just caught his eye and he said, "Can't you do something with that?" And that was the start of Wave Race 64, where he was basically tasked with like figuring out how to take those waves created in the demo, turn it into a fun game. Here we are.
Yeah. And I don't want to, and not to like geek out about it too much, because I'm looking at the same piece of like interview thing. Takahashi says that the programmer who went on to create the base program for Wii Sports is the same person who did the wave programming for the game. So it's like, I think Takahashi is like obsessed with the body, but this unnamed programmer that like, part of like the reality of Nintendo is like a lot of like the work is sort of like obscured, like especially in some of these earlier games. Like I don't know if we'd be able to 100% confirm like who that programmer was. Yeah. But I think like there is like an important delineation there, which is like this person who was like being occupied with the waves is different from being occupied with the human form upon the waves. Because like you think of Wii Sports. Have you ever played Wii Sports? I don't want to get too off the
I remember
rails.
when it came out and trying like bowling or something and maybe tennis. I mean,
it is not a game. Ironically enough, it is not a game occupied with the body.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like that.
It's like these like representative interactions that like your human body is literally interfacing with the like motion controlled Wii remote.
Yeah.
But I think of Wave Race 64 and the way that, because the whole reason we got on this is talking about like you were saying like their legs look like French fries. Like, but it's you look at some of the animations of how the tricks are rendered in Wave Race, and it's like pretty highly detailed. It's like you see them like move their arms and like get in position. And even with the simple polygons, it is like rendering a lot of human body motion. You think of a Wii Sports and it's just like a lot of doot. Like it's more representational.
I mean, I didn't, like you said, there's not that much documentation about the making of Wave Race 64, but I do wonder if like, because it is weird that this game is only 2-player and not 4-player like other N64 games. But I wonder if they just use so much data and that in like this kind of stuff, like the waves are crazy and
I think
amazing.
It's literally
and the animations.
Yeah, I think it was literally, it came down to a concern of like you can only render two
because back then,
the
I mean, I don't know what Wave Race actually runs at. I would be surprised if it even reaches 20 frames per second. But I can imagine a 4-player Wave Race just being like literally like 6 frames per second,
grinding
like
to a halt,
just an absolute nightmare, and like killing everyone's N64. But I mean, there are 2 directors on the game, and they both. I mean, one of the cool things I think that I'm learning through this podcast about Nintendo is that like, if they worked on an early successful game, they went on to work on 100 more Nintendo games, right?
Yes.
Like, so Takahashi.
He's like one of the guys now. He's like one of the faces of the company.
Produced Mario Kart Double Dash and 1080, like you said, and mocap for Ocarina, and 100 more credits on 100 more games. And the other director, Katsuya Eguchi, created Animal Crossing, worked on Super Mario World, Star Fox, Wii Sports, Splatoon. Like these guys are like legends now.
Yeah.
Who started on Wave Race 64, which is crazy.
It's because like I think Wave Race 64 is at a time in Nintendo where like the team sizes are still like pretty small. Like I didn't fully dive into like the full credits of the game, but it's like it couldn't be more than like 20 people tops. Like Mario probably. 64 is like 15 people.
Yeah.
Tops. And I think that speaks to, it's not just like you put in your work at Nintendo and you get to move up. It's more just, I think maybe the more striking thing is like certain people at the company have like worked there for a long time, such that like they were making choices a long time ago that like,
and Takahashi is one of the ones who just had a very advanced, I think, understanding of a 3D space and like rendering 3D characters in a game. Because it was so early, he went to art school for like 3D graphics or something.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's the only reason they hired him, was just like, you know, we're going to 3D now and we don't know what the fuck we're doing, basically, because no one's ever done anything like this.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes a long way. It's just right place, right time, and like right skill set, basically.
Totally. And I don't think this is a thing that's especially relevant to like how Nintendo makes games, but I keep hammering on the idea that like one of my theses about this game is like Takahashi is obsessed with the body. But like truly, it's like you look at like one of the games that he made before Wave Race. He's the original designer on a game called Kirby's Dream Course, which is, it's like a golf game essentially. But it's a game that's rendered in an isometric perspective. So it's like kind of wrangling 3D information. And it's like a game that's about like the propulsion of not a body, but like a simple sphere, like navigating through a space in a way. So it's like,
what's it called again? I kind of want to look it up.
Kirby's Dream Course. It's a fascinating little game.
Sounds fucking cool.
It's pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah. I want to check this out. Yeah.
And I think there is like a pretty direct through line from that game to this game in terms of like you're maneuvering this like form in a physical, like in a space kind of, and like you're ultimately beholden to like chance interactions in the space.
Right.
Because like it's a golf game. So it's like you set the amount of propulsion and directionality and stuff. But the design of the level is ultimately like what's being like interfaced with the propulsion and the directionality. And like that's what Wave Race 64 is, I think, too. And I'm struggling to make the connection back to like the human body, because it's like rendering the human body is very different from ball go 100 speed in that 45-degree angle. You know, like the number of interactions occurring in Wave Race 64 feel like super modern in a way. Like it's like really there's so many points of articulation when you're playing the game.
It feels incredibly advanced. It like we talked about like how good it feels and the joystick and all that stuff. There's also just like the reactivity of like landing in the water, or like you feel like your whole body like slam down, you know, and it's in a way that just like, again, it's just hard to recreate that sort of feeling over and over and over again of like, I'm really fighting with this force that I can't control.
And I think it's like maybe because it is like a physics-based system that's like ultimately about dealing with the waves rather than like nailing lines or wrangling your jet ski. It's about like, how can I use my jet ski to wrangle these waves? Because it's because I'm thinking now about like this was a thing I had prepared for the episode of the Wide Flank podcast. Is the Wikipedia page for personal watercraft racing video games.
Oh my god!
Which like
there were a bunch of others, right?
There's a few.
Okay.
The one that truly comes to mind for me is like Jet Moto, which like I don't think is like truly a a jet ski game. It's like a PlayStation game that's like essentially
I've heard
like
of it. Yeah,
you're driving like a boat or like a hover boat.
It looks like shit.
But it's like not. There's like I'm looking at.
It's like also a motorcycle or something.
Yeah, like it's not especially concerned with the water. Really, it's just like, what if you rode on and like. To get into the history of the development of Wave Race a little bit more, I don't know if you saw in your research the footage of like the original version of Wave Race 64.
Oh, the Game Boy one, you mean? Oh, no.
Well, the Game Boy one is one thing.
I didn't see the original version of 64.
There was like a demo of it shown in like 1995, which is like
sick.
It's far more akin to a Jet Moto or like F-Zero, and it's just like. Yeah. What if this type of vehicle navigated this type of space? And it's literally just like a boat navigating on like flat water, basically.
I mean, there was all those quotes of like, they used to call it F-Zero on water, and then Miyamoto, in his infinite wisdom, was just like, this isn't any different from any other game, and
truly
we have to make this like unique and cool, and like
it's like the feel of the vehicle can only go so far. And I think that's the thing, is like Wave Race 64 is not a game necessarily about, I mean, it is very much about how literally I don't think it's about how the jet ski feels. I think it's about how maneuvering the human body atop the vehicle that's atop the waves. Look, I feel like we're saying this over and over.
It is very different, though. Like
it's about the human and the waves way more than it is about the vehicle.
If you haven't played it, I think it's probably difficult to understand. But if you're playing a car racing game, it is about how the car feels, because the road is pretty consistent, and there's there essentially is no player character in a car racing game. That's just you. Like, right, the controller's like the steering wheel. That's what it is. Yeah. That's what those games are. And the difference is that extra layer that Wave Race has is like, there's a player character that you're trying to control, like a puppet master who needs to like tame the jet ski and tell it where to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's actually very different than like the traditional like Cruisin' USA or something like that, the way it feels.
Sure. And like, okay, so I want to come back around to the notion of like to get a little more personal, because we've been diving into Wave Race 64.
All we did was dive.
I think we've done a damn good job of that. I do want to talk to you, Alon, a little bit about like what is it? What's your damage? Why don't you like racing games? Like what is it? What's it like when you play a racing game?
It's a good question. I wish I had thought more about it before we recorded, but I just don't gravitate towards them. I don't really find them to be like fun or interesting or engaging. I actually like the way that the time trial mode works in Wave Race 64, where you just are trying to get the best time and you're really just like against yourself. Feels more interesting to me than sort of like the circuits where I'm like, oh, there's like an AI. I finished second place. Like, cool.
Sure.
Where it's like in a Super Meat Boys kind of way, I'm trying to like optimize my run, and there's like a ghost of your doing a slower time and you can like beat it. You're racing against yourself is like sort of interesting, but it just runs out very quickly for me. I guess I just have like a short views. I think that's the wrong way to use that, but like I don't have a lot of rope for racing games. Like I play it and it's kind of cool and it's kind of fun and the music is Wipeout. The music's cool, and then I just want to stop playing immediately. Like I don't feel like it's the type of thing that I want to engage with and get much better at. And I think part of that is also, like I was saying at the very beginning with the X-axis, is like I don't really feel like I have that much skill expression other than just like drive better, turn a little better, decelerate, and all these things are really hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but like I just don't feel that locked in when it's like, oh, I could have like decelerated 0.2 milliseconds earlier and made that turn a little more perfect and nailed it. Whereas
So I
Wave Race
wonder-
has that extra
Yeah.
aspect of like, I feel like I'm controlling everything around me in terms of the jet ski and the character and,
Mhm.
all this. It just feels more like fun.
It's like everything you're doing matters as
Everything
opposed
matters.
to like a lot of racing games I think are occupied with like, this is what matters right now. Nail it
Yes.
or not.
And also, I
And
think
like,
Wave Race is interesting because there's not like this notion of like, you need to like perfect this race. I think Wave Race is very accepting of the fact that like, no one's perfecting this race. It's fucking crazy. There's a hurricane and there's spiked metal things in the water and the wall and concrete.
If
And
if you finish this, good job.
yeah, if you
Like,
finish
yeah.
and like survive and don't miss all the buoys, then like you did pretty well. Whereas I do
Yeah.
feel like realistic, like Forza and whatever those games are really just about like drive the perfect race.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Just
Have you ever played
never captured me.
This is getting way outside the realm of Wave Race, but I think it's relevant. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever played the Ridge Racer games?
No, I heard they're sick and the aesthetic is sick.
I mean, the aesthetic is wow, but
Yeah.
Ridge Racer, I don't think of as like racing games. I think of them as drift games because it's a game
Yeah.
that like so heavily emphasizes the moment of a drift. Like, it's
Right.
like nailing a line is way less important than knowing when to deploy a drift and then managing a drift.
Yeah.
And like managing a drift, like it's Wave Race 64 is not especially occupied with it. Like, it's not occupied with drifting, but it is occupied with these like, I need to navigate this situation right here in this way.
It's
And
like dealing with crisis after crisis.
yeah. And like Ridge Racer games at their best, I feel like, are often enough.
Yeah, it
like,
sounds cool.
oh, I gotta drift like this way. Like, perfect.
I think the one that
Ooh, Mamma
everyone
mia.
loves is Mario Kart. And I just, it's just so uninteresting to me to be like, what if it was racing, but like you get power ups and you actually don't want to be in first place. You want to be in fifth place to optimize the item and then get into first place later. I'm just like, is this a racing game? Like, you shouldn't, I don't like comeback mechanics. I'm a competitive gamer, so I don't know. It's just never done it for me.
Get good at Mario Kart.
Yeah, literally.
Child.
Itemless Mario Kart would be a lot more interesting. to me.
There are some modes in Mario Kart. This is getting way off of Wave Race, but there are some modes in Mario Kart where like it's just green shells, so it's like a far more skill based.
Cool.
Like,
yeah, that's cool.
Like the
It's a
only
shooter
item
now.
I get is like a straight ahead shooter thing. And I think Mario Kart like does have. There are like drift mechanics in it that feel like okay, but it's not like
tapping the shoulder button or whatever, right?
Because I hear, exactly. And I hear what you're saying, though, that it's like some of the items in Mario Kart games feel like a little trashy and just like, now this is happening. Okay. Like, and that can be fun, but
it's
like
fun at some point, and then like you're in first place doing well, and you get like this impossible to
Blasted.
avoid purple shell, and you're just like, oh, what is the point of this?
And you just like zone out a little bit.
Yeah, you're just like, oh,
okay.
my 8-year-old cousin got me, and whatever. It's what it is, brother.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know. It's just not for me. And I'm willing to be proven wrong. I'll play Ridge Racer. I'll play whatever the fuck people want. Excite Bike, like whatever.
I'm not trying to convince you to play Mario Kart 64. I truly do want you to play Ridge Racer. Like,
yeah, Ridge Racer.
I want everyone to play Ridge Racer.
Yeah,
Ridge Racer 1, Rage Racer, Ridge Racer Revolution, Ridge Racer 4. Like it's like they're all kind of
God,
the
there's
same
so
game.
many. Oh my god.
It's all the same game, but like the game is good.
There's so many. It's kind of scary.
It's just play any of them. It doesn't matter. And there's a kinship between Ridge Racer and Wave Race 64, I think, because like at the time that Wave Race 64 came out, it was like there's only so many courses in the game, and I think like we live in an era now of like content quantity.
Yeah, there's no skins. There's only like 8 courses.
Yeah, but it forces you to contend with like learn this. Like it's not even about learn this course. It's just like this is the course, here are the mechanics, play with them, period. Like, it's not about like, here's a new course. And so I want to come back to Drake Lake now. Drake Lake. Do you remember off the top of your head what Drake Lake is?
Are you kidding me, dude? I played hours of the same. Drake Lake, the music? Are you kidding me? What do you think of the music of Drake Lake? Or No Hold Feelings?
On. Let me pull it up. Drake Lake.
It's got the like flute going. I can't believe you don't know this. I'm pissed.
React to this in real time.
Yeah, live reaction. Are you playing it now?
Oh, it's the battle.
Yeah. It's straight up. It's straight like you're in Hyrule, but you're also on a jet ski racing. Like, it's fucking unreal. The fog,
I wish
the ducks.
Yo, the birds. We have not touched upon the presence of wildlife in Wave Race 64. We shall. But for now, I want to talk about the fact that, like, I would love to talk more about Kazumi Totaka, the composer on the game. But once again, there's not much primary material.
Yeah.
And you don't come to Wide Flank to hear, like, what we think. No. But it's
maybe.
I'm not gonna, maybe. But, like, I am curious about, like, where that mother effer is in his career and, like, what is like the prompt for this game? Like, at what point is it?
I would love to know that. Yeah.
At what point in the development of this game is it like we need some dry music? Like, this music needs to be like crystal clear and because like the whole game is aesthetically like very clean and crystalline, and like the music reflects that. But it's like, how, like, this person, like, there's no interviews about it. Like, we don't have any insight into.
Bizarre. Yeah, it's really also just.
I'm just gonna put on the I referenced this before, but
it's just not Nintendo to me. I'm like, oh, this is like very contemporary. This is touching on hyperpop. This is a whole retro thing that people are bringing back right now. This whole aesthetic, exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, but wait, this is written by the guy who did all of these other Zelda games and,
like, far more gamey games,
far more classic Nintendo type of like ditties. And he just like put this like banger album out that's just like so futuristic and different. It's just, I would love to know more about it.
I think, like, you know, I think something, we don't dance around it on Wide Flank, but I think, like, I tend to look at games from like a game and aesthetic perspective, and you come at things often enough from like a sports perspective, or like a broader game. Like, I come at things from like a gamer or like art culture perspective, and you come at things from like a sports and play perspective. Is that bold of me to say?
Sports and you could even just say like competitive angle, because it's like competitive games and sports or something. I don't know.
The only reason I'm flagging all of that is because I think Wave Race 64 is true. And we didn't really talk about this or suss this out, but I think like Wave Race 64 is a pretty solid intersection of like sports aesthetics and game aesthetics.
Yes.
Like, it's because I think about sports as like so much of the real world, right? Like, it's aesthetically, at least, you know, because you can talk about how like Mario 64 is of the real world because the real world is about moving around, and it's like
jumping up stuff.
Jumping. You don't jump that high in real world. You don't fight Ganondorf in the real world. But I think Wave Race 64, like, because I'm thinking about the music right now, and I like when I think of the music, I think of like golf and like interstitial music from like sports broadcasts.
Yeah, it touches on lots of different eras, and, you know, hair metal guitar, and
guitar is a little stinky.
Yeah, it's like a little stinky, and there's like what's it called? Like, just like synth, like someone's like literally just running their hand down a piano on a synth. Yeah, like just to like get you fucking revved up, and there's like just like rockin' drums, and all of this shit is combined. And then there's also like one of my favorite little bits is like when you start a race, and in the distance it's just like do 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 do, and it's just like, oh my god, like unbelievable, just like a little magical little moment there. And
yeah, like these like little, because it's like the game is constantly setting its tone. Like
Yes.
it's the game is hyper focused on the play of it, and like we keep saying, like how do you maneuver this human body through this natural environment?
yeah,
But at the same time, it's also, there's so much set dressing around like the interactions of the human body and the nature. And like, again, I'm getting in my head a little bit about it, but it's like, well, rendering water is set dressing. Designing a human body is set, but it's like when we're talking about the and they're like, get ready. Like these are things that like kind of exist inside and outside of the experience, like as you're playing it, kind of like, because like you see a human body navigating water and it's like, that's the reality of the race. But like the game going, like, who does that exist for? That exists for you, gamer. Like it's just such a treat. It's just such a delightful package. We're not here to be like Wave Race 64 good game, huh? But
it's fucking pure pleasure for me. Like it's
pure pleasure.
It's just like happiness. Like it's as soon as it starts and the jingles and the look and the vibe, it's just like, and this is something that I think is very Nintendo about this game. Like I feel like everything I've said that is not very Nintendo, like it's such a game that's focused on the right things, which is just fun. Like it had to like feel good and music, blah blah, but like it has to be fucking fun, or we're not putting it out, kind of thing.
As the great Reggie Fils-Aimé says, if it's not fun, why do it? Or it's something like that. There is like literally like a promotional quote. That's
is that
like,
true? Yeah, I don't know that.
It's like the president of Nintendo of America saying, like, if it's not fun, why do it? Or like,
is Big the movie where like Tom Hanks is like an adult, or is like a kid in an adult body for the
Coney Island
and worked for the toy company, right?
Something like that. Yeah, sounds right.
And that's the vibe I'm getting in a weird way. Is like Miyamoto's handing, the beta version of Wave Race to a kid in an adult's body who plays it and is like, it's okay. And Miyamoto's like, it's not like it's F-Zero on water. It fucking rocks. And the kid's like, it's not that cool. It's like the water doesn't matter. I'm not interacting with it. It's just like not any better than any of the 2D racers that were on SNES that I love.
Sure.
And like that had to happen on some level in order to be like, oh, this, yes, I forgot it's 3D. It doesn't have to just look 3D. It has to like interact in the 3D world.
And like the players' interactions need to be like 3-dimensional interactions.
Yes,
which
exactly.
I think like we've like pretty well established like that the game is about like physically maneuvering like 3D interaction. Like the waves as they're rendered in the game.
Yes.
It's not just about like this couldn't have been done earlier. It's like it could be done and then it was. And I think that's the thing that brings this game into the future too, because it's like I'm always thinking about a game called Riders Republic. Do you know this video? I think I've mentioned it on earlier episodes.
Yeah, I think you've told me about it or something.
Nobody cares about this game except for me. It's like an Ubisoft open world extreme sports game.
Fucking
you bicycle,
sick. Okay.
You ski.
Tell me more.
You can fly in the air. But even this special game that I love so much, they don't fuck with water like at all. The interactions in this game are the like bumpiness of a bicycle maneuvering geometry. Like this game, which is like the cutting edge of sports vehicle gaming.
Yeah.
Which is something I care about.
Sports vehicle gaming,
as it turns out.
Oh yeah.
Does not even bother. I think, and that's the thing that I'm trying to say. Like Wave Race 64, bringing it into the future, there are not really. I mean, I'm sure you could rattle off a list of games that like have meaningful interactions with water, but like, the man, like it's. I'm just gonna make the point, which is that like there are not many games in my experience that like truly like meaningfully are about like interactions with water. Like
Yeah, I mean, I start to
go.
think of more contemporary games, and the ones that come to mind are like small parts in a big game. Right? It's like GTA. There's a jet ski, and like you sometimes have to do shit on
waves.
it. Yeah, and like you know, it's almost like a shout out to remember Wave Race 64? That was sick. But like,
it's like
it has nothing to do with the game.
Yeah, it has like a wave system built out and a vehicle system built out, and they're like combined.
Yes,
and like there isn't really. It happens, but it's not like
I don't like
especially meaningful.
I haven't run into this at all in my research. Maybe there's something there, but the closest I could come up with is like I want to say it's called an airboat in Half-Life 2. Do you remember that like level?
Yeah.
Where you're just like on this boat and you're fucking hitting jumps and like going over the sand things or whatever.
Yeah, I think by virtue of like how much that game demands you to like navigate using this unwieldy thing, like that's the thing that kind of resonates with Wave Race.
And that feels like, because that's what, 3 years after Wave Race. That's 99, I think, and it's like that
2004. I think you're thinking.
That's okay.
So it's like
maybe
7 years after.
So and that sort of feels like the type of game where I'm like, yeah, I could see them. They had a meeting at some point and we're like, this feels like a 2D boat. And they're like, we need to like look at Wave Race. Like we need to make this like different and sick. And
how can we use the full 360 directionality of this control? I mean, ironically, like honestly, like Half-Life, I do think about in terms of like the WASD input. Like it is a very just like computer centric, like it's propulsion oriented in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I think
which is a D-pad basically.
Yeah. And like I think where Half-Life 2 steps in terms of like the levels it's designed kind of and like the physical spaces more than and ironically enough for Wave Race 64, it's like I think this comes back to what I was saying about Dolphin Park, that it's like I wish there were more spaces in this game that were like open-ended and like less linearly designed. Yeah. And like I hope that a game like that that feels like a design concept that is like ripe for like some itch.io developer to just like put together of just
totally. I mean,
I built out the Wave Race 64 system, but with like a Tony Hawk trick system.
Yeah, there is like a
level layout.
You know, they made a sequel. I just think no one played it, and everyone said it's just like, yeah, it's okay. They kind of just like made it look a little nicer, but it doesn't feel the same. Which like as soon as you say it doesn't feel the same, I'm like, oh, that's the whole game. Like that's the entire game. But like, I was thinking about, I haven't played much of Skate or, you know, like Skate 1 through 4 or whatever, but that is like the other game that came to mind when I was like doing my thesis on the joystick. And I was like, that's a game where like you like the stick is the game. Like you just have to master that stick. And you know, that's really like the whole game is like how skillful you become with that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know much other water games really.
Water based. I mean, I'm not even trying to. I think like truly, it's like we could try to find it, but it is the sort of thing where it's like the promise is represented in Dolphin Park in Wave Race 64. There is a play space within this game where you are just like maneuvering the waves and your body and your machine and hitting jumps and just sort of testing things out and like
in the sun feeling good,
the surf splattering on your face. And I think like I'm not even being like, why didn't they do this? Because it's like they made the like racing seemed like a more reasonable mechanism for like progression. Like it's linear. Like it's you know, it might speak to what you're saying about why you don't like racing games. It's just like this is what it is, and like, and I don't think that's the feeling of playing Wave Race 64.
I don't think
like,
so.
You don't really get bored during the races in this game.
Never for me. Like it's so active. Like the fight that you're in.
I think it's like what I'm struggling with is just like they built out these interactions like so thoroughly that like the idea that they're in service of just like getting through a race that's just like truly like a part of me. I should have messed with this a little bit more, but I think I might go back to the game and do this of just like do a time trials and then just drive around wherever I want.
Yeah. Or you
Like-
can just do warm up and just actually chill in Dolphin Park the whole time.
What? But Dolphin Park is only so big. I need more content, Alon.
I know. People say
Like, it's-
Sea of Thieves is really good water and waves.
I mean,
and
it
shit.
is.
But like, I don't
Completely
think
different,
it's
yeah.
like you can't like enjoy yourself on the water, right?
There's
As
a-
far as I
there-
know.
They got a little boat in that game. Like you
Okay.
can like row a little boat, but that's not.
You're not fucking cruising.
You're not riding. Yeah, no. Sea
Yeah.
of Thieves is a whole other. That's a good game. That's a good video game, dude.
Yeah.
Ridge
Yeah.
Racer, Sea of Thieves. These are the good. These are the good video games.
There ain't
But yeah, no-
nothing like Wave Race 64. Straight
Yeah.
up.
Very
there is
special, very
nothing
singular
like it.
game for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna refer to my notes now and just start pulling out some more.
Tell me, because
idea.
I'm pretty cooked. I feel
You're
good about the
cooked.
episode. I mean, I have like I have other
Yeah.
little notes here and there, but I feel like we covered most of the like main thing.
Let's lay them out. All right. So here, I sort of was alluding to this earlier, which is like, actually, no, I didn't talk about this at all. So as much as like in that last section, I was talking about like all of this in service of a race. Like, no, the racing is good because the way that the mechanism of the race design is like, it like adds stakes to the physical interactions
Yes,
with the waves
yes,
and the
yes.
body. And the way it manifests is like the tension builds within a given race. Like you're ultimately beholden to the waves because like you're racing and like by like midway through the second lap, you're like, oh shit, I haven't messed up at all. Like I'm
Yeah.
really cruising here. And then it becomes like, if I mess up at all, like I'm hosed. Like I'm out of this race.
Yeah.
And so every little like bumpy interaction becomes like super dramatic because it is like anything could happen. Like
Yeah.
so as much as I'm talking about, I think my whole notion of a whole game that's Dolphin Park is like at odds with what is good about Wave Race 64, which is what I'm describing right now, which
There
is
has
like
to be stakes. Yeah. Yeah.
the stakes and how the stakes escalate. Yeah.
And like I'm not here to call every game a fucking roguelite or whatever the hell people say now, but there is like a little bit of that, at least for me, like a loop type of thing with the circuits when it gets hard. And like I would just like mess up early on Sunset Bay and I would just restart the whole circuit. I'm just like,
Oh, for real?
fuck it.
Sunset
I want to.
Bay being like the first.
I think it's like the
first,
second or first or second level,
yeah.
or like even Drake Lake. It's the third level, I think, and I would just restart because I'm just like, oh fuck, I could have done that better. Like I want to
yeah.
nail this again, and like you're saying, I mean, there's just not
Broad
many.
tension.
Like ultimately, I think there has to be like a win condition, right? There has to be like a
Yeah.
game here. Nintendo's
Yeah.
not just going to release an itch.io sandbox, right? Like that's
Ski-Doo sandbox.
yeah, like that's just not gonna be there. So I think that
Yeah.
ultimately like racing is a pretty good one, where the other options would be like, I think like you said, like some sort of more fleshed out stunt mode, like
Tony Hawk,
Olympics stunt mode where you like get graded on your tricks and move on to, and it's like, yeah, that could have been it, but going fast is really fun, and
it's
hitting waves out of control is fun, right? I think that like
totally.
what genre brings out the best in the game, I think ultimately is racing, even though when you
Mhm.
play it, you're just like, wow, I want more of this. Not like, I don't want to go on another race. I just want to fucking cruise sometimes.
Mess around on
And
the
mess around,
waves.
which you never really
Yeah.
get to do. I mean, I guess like they could have had a warm up pre every level. That would be cool.
Sure.
So it's like next race is Drake Lake, and then you have the option of like go to race or warm up. And then you can
warm up on Drake Lake.
And then you could just warm up on Drake Lake and cruise around Drake Lake and check it out and do tricks and whatever and fuck around. And then be like, all right, I'll start the race. Like, I know the map now, and you can start it. But I don't know. That's just, speaking of backseat developing, that's what I just did.
I was about to say, like, armchair developing grown men.
0 made games in my life. Actually, I did a game jam once, so that counts. I'm a developer.
I've developed concepts.
There we go. So we know what we're fucking doing.
What is shipping? What is shipping a game?
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, I'm glad we talked about that, because like I think like it is like a bit fanciful to be like, yo, combine Tony Hawk with Wave Race.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, would that be fun? Like, would you have to build out the trick system more? Like, is that really? And but at the same time, like, I've got that game. I've got my Riders Republic. Riders Republic is a game where you just sort of cruise around, and I love it to bits.
Yeah.
It doesn't
also
have
straight up, not to like, be that guy, but straight up Tony Hawk does not exist without Wave Race. Like, that's another perfect example of a game that came out 2 or 3 years after Wave Race. I don't have it open right now. 2 or 3 years after Wave Race, that feels sick and feels like you're actually in control of the skateboard, and felt really special when you first played it. And the 3D isn't exactly the same as Wave Race, because nothing is, because you're ultimately driving on flat surfaces. Even the ramps are flat, but you do have to like lean forward and lean backwards, and you do have to balance left and right when you're manualing and stuff. That they took parts of that and were like, we can make a skateboard game out of that. And I think that like harnessing that like physicality and putting it on a skateboard is like ultimately what led to their success.
I think you nailed it earlier though, when you were talking about like the skate video games, which are like, it's like subtler in terms of like how you use the stick and the movement and the motion and things like that. Because when I think of Tony Hawk games, I think of those as like super rigid designs in a lot of ways.
And they're old.
It's like
they're also old.
They're very old. But it's like, in those games, it is about like how you maneuver your avatar through the like level layout. And like, it's about, it's like, it's not necessarily like a full 360 game. Like, that's another XY game, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas Skate is, I think, is fundamentally like an XYZ game.
I think you're right.
Wave Race 64 is like
that's
XYZ. Right. And I'm not even trying to be like, you're wrong, bro.
No, I think
it's
you're
more
right.
just like, because I think you're right though, that like Tony Hawk comes out of playing around with like, how do we maneuver 3D objects within a space in a playful way, which like is set by like Mario 64, Wave Race, and like to a lesser extent Pilot Wings. Pilot Wings is a whole other Pilot Wings. I don't know if we'll ever talk about Pilot Wings.
I don't think we will. Just play the monkey ball mini game instead. It's more fun. Yeah.
Oh. What else we got? You got anything in your bag of tricks? Because I got other things. You got any things you want to cover?
No, I really enjoyed entering my initials though in the time trials when I get a good time and I want to save my record. Did you do that ever?
Of course I did. What did you spell out?
Well, ass is what I always do.
Yeah.
As a child, because my actual initials are AS. I have no middle name, but as a punk little shit child, I just told everyone my middle name was Sean, actually, and so I'd say no, my initials are just ass, and that was my cool trick. But it just like I don't know, every little thing in this game aesthetically is so fucking strong, and you play and you're loving it and you're doing it, and then all of a sudden you have to enter your initials in the end.
It's like super dry, like just like
it's like the splish splashy futuristic thing.
You're literally talking about how like the input, like the like letter input render.
I'm talking about how it's fucking incredible.
You're rotating through a list of letters, and anytime you select a letter, it like does like a wave ripple effect. And,
the letter like splashes into the water. It's just like
it's incredible,
so cool, man.
It's so deep.
Cool.
And you know, I was yelling because ass is those are the initials
ass
that I do
sick.
as well. And
ass is
Sean is my God-given name, and you know,
what's your middle name?
Sick. Michael. It's neither here nor there.
Shawn Michael.
Shawn Michael. My father's name. Anywho, my father's name is Michael. Anywho, let's get back to what matters. Right?
I'm just thinking about the
games.
wrestler, the WWF guy, Shawn Michaels.
Who? Brett Michaels?
Shawn Michaels.
Who's Shawn? Anywho, there's different size waves in different levels. I don't want to talk about me or wrestling.
No problem.
No, we could tune into the next episode of GLHF, and we'll rant and rave about each other's
90s WWF guys.
I got nothing to say about none of that.
The waves being different. You want to go on, pop off about that? I don't know. Pop off.
The different size waves in different levels. Drake Lake is flat. So we didn't really dive all the way. Drake Lake, I don't think Drake Lake is like the fucking archstone of the game. Do you know what that means?
No.
Like
how'd you know that I didn't know what that means? Was I making a face? Or you just know at this point that I just don't know what fucking anything means?
I've started to suss out. Like, I have a certain coworker where I was like, well, like what? Like, it's like beyond the pale? And she was like, what? I was like, beyond the pale. And she's like, what does that...
Are
and
you
I was
calling
just like,
me pale?
Yeah, like it's I started to clock that the way I talk is maybe, you know, I draw on poet. You know, I'm just verbose. No, it's you got to speak a little more plainly. But the point is that in Drake Lake, I don't think Drake Lake is the archstone of, and the archstone is the one. It's like when you build an arch and it's all stacked stones, and then you put one stone in the top that like holds it all together.
Oh, okay.
And so like the structure is like it's like a physical construction that like it holds itself up. But you need to have like that one stone in the top to like secure it.
The power stone.
The power stone. Point is, Drake Lake is a level that like it rebuffs all notions of Wave Race 64 by being like, what if there were no waves?
But there's like fog and it's a marsh. Like it's just different weather, which I really love. Yeah.
And they follow up Drake Lake with like the most tumultuous
and
levels.
That's the marine one, right? The one where you jump over the wall.
Marine Fortress or whatever the hell it's called.
I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Yeah.
And I think like it brings to the forefront the experience. Like if you haven't been thinking about the waves because you're a little freak, the game is like, no, like this is what it's like when there's no waves, and this is what it's like when there's lots of waves.
Be fucking crazy.
And so it like really focuses your attention and makes you reckon with like, oh yeah, there are a million endless permutations of like how I can interact with the waves in this game.
It's unbelievable.
It's the waves.
Sometimes you hit it right at the wave is sort of cresting and you're sort of like you're surfing on it at some points, you know what I mean? And you're just hitting it and you're like, oh, like you just have this epiphany of like, this wave actually isn't going to fuck me up. I'm just going to like, just keep my speed and just like fucking floor it on this thing. Like, and then sometimes you see other waves where like, I'm about to go like off screen 20 feet in the air.
I'm going to have to wrangle this one. And you only know it like as it's happening, kind of.
Did you see the clip that I put in the Discord?
No, I didn't see the clip you put in the Discord.
Well, on Marine Fortress, there's a shortcut. Well, so like when you play on hard, there's
in the Wave Race channel.
Yeah, in the Wave Race channel, there's a shortcut where like this wall raises. Just in the normal race, like it just opens up, and then all of a sudden you can get access to the shortcut. But I saw this clip of a dude
under the gate.
who goes under the wall before it's opened up. And the way he does that is like hitting a jump perfectly timed, tilting the nose of the jet ski down, and he goes under the fucking gate and into the shortcut before it's open.
Oh,
it's just like, it's so fucking
beautiful.
Sick.
I just
so
watched
cool.
it. It is beautiful.
It's really worth watching. Shout out to him. And it's a
streamer named Easy Allies, right?
Love it.
I think that's what his name is.
I don't know.
It's incredible. I'm watching the clip right now. Oh,
it's so
beautiful. Sick. This is a beautiful game. There's a bunch of other. Come on down to the Wide Flank Discord. There's all sorts of wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Svenny had some questions in the Wave Race channel too. But finish your point, and then we'll come back at
which point.
I don't know. You're about to say something, and I cut you off as usual.
Different size waves in different levels. I've already talked about that.
Okay.
The way tension builds is paced out within an individual race. I already talked about that.
Yeah, whatever. Svenny said, why don't more games sound like this now? It's very iconic and soothing vibe, but you don't really see games try to recreate this aesthetic, audio or visual.
So there's a little bit of animation lore, which is that the Toy Story film was made the way it was because where 3D rendering was at is that it looked like plastic. And so it was like, what? You know what we'll get away with? Rendering plastic toys.
Just making it plastic.
We ain't gonna render bugs just yet.
Yeah.
We ain't gonna render cars just yet.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that like maybe that's part of what's going on with Wave Race 64 is like the aesthetics reflect like where the technology is at, kind of. Like you look at the 3D text of the logo and things like that, and it is like such a particular style of render. It's kind of like low poly, like simple textures.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to dryly answer his question.
No, I think you're
about
right.
Sound.
Well, yeah, because I was gonna say
I glommed onto the visual aesthetic,
the visual and the sound. They're both just like now. That's just like there's indie games for that now. The difference between then being a marquee third game ever out for N64 and now is that like that's not what mainstream games look and sound like now, and that's not like the budget of mainstream games anymore. But there still are games, and honestly, none are like immediately coming to mind. But there still are games that like, shout out to this type of 90s, 80s, 90s extreme sports aesthetic and have that sort of like hyper pop kind of vibe. And
I think it's telling to both Sunny's question and like the reality of this game that it's like, if you think about a game that approaches the aesthetics of this game that's produced now, it tends to be manifested as like, this is a retro styled game.
Yeah, totally.
As opposed to games that are like directly reckoning with like, what is the quality of these games that we like, as opposed to just like, yo, low poly. Like it's like I'm fine with fucking like low poly games, but it's like there is something deeper, I think, about Wave Race, not about Wave Race 64 specifically, but about like any piece of art made in its time.
Yeah,
that's like, it's not about just, and I'm going back on what I was like. I don't think it's just about like the Toy Story thing of like, well, this is what we could render. It's like, this is what we could render, and this is what we did render. And I don't even know I don't know what the bottom line is, but it's something about like.
I also just think that the whole, like, I was praising Nintendo so much earlier for being like, they made a fun game. And the reason I like emphasize so much on that is because like, and I know Svenny is a sports fan and plays sports video games. It's what I've seen over the last 20, 30 years is like sports games in general get less fun. The more realistic the means like the more slow and like less fun, and more focused on making it feel like a real baseball game. I'm like, wait, but like Ken Griffey was like so fun and perfect, and it was real baseball. And like, I just can't even imagine some EA or whatever the fuck, like making Wave Race 2025, like it would suck.
Sure.
Like it would be way too focused on like realism and less focused on like speed and fun and like just the, you know, tactile feel of it all. So, and then like you play a game like Tape to Tape, which, you know, like we could talk about how it looks. We don't love it, but it's just fun. Like it's just fun. You compare that to like a brand new AAA hockey game. Tape to Tape is just more fun and it's more of gamey.
Sure.
And I think that like this was just the perfect moment in time where both things were happening. This is what AAA games were. Yeah.
That's what I was going to cut in with, is like, this is like a time in development where like those hard
mechanics
are like just like, because they are approaching some amount of like rendering reality. In Wave Race 64. But it is still beholden, and it's. I think it's important too that like it's a Nintendo developed game, which like is like this is the play first company, and like I don't think like EA is disinterested in play. Like I think about, I don't know these games very well, but I think there are Madden games that like mess around with the sticks, or like even like what are the 2K NBA 2K?
Yeah,
like do those games have like sophisticated like stick based?
Yeah, I think they probably do now. I don't play them anymore, but yeah, I think they do now. But it's all very...
But it's in the mix of,
it's just with the goal of feeling real. And I think what I've realized, and maybe it's just because I'm old, but what I've realized in playing sports games and stuff is that like we think we want real, but we actually want Wave Race.
Sure.
And real is not that fun. And I think that like we were just saying, it's the perfect like time and perfect place. Is like if Takahashi arrived at Nintendo and they were like, we have 2025 technology, like obviously he would use it, right? Like anyone would have been like, oh yeah, I can make a game that looks like this
fully.
If fucking immediately, yes, I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna make Wave Race, but we almost just got lucky in a way that wasn't available. And they did the best they could with what they had. And what they produced was both a realistic game, because you are on sort of realistic water and on a jet ski in a, you know, Earth-like world, but also this fucking weird time in technology and 3D and all the shit that made it super fast and gamey and all this shit. Yeah.
It's a super singular game that like I think maybe is easy to take for granted, especially for like a certain age of gamer. Because it's like it's one of those games that was just like, like I'm a 90s kid. Like Wave Race came out and I played it. Like, but it's like, no, when you play the game, it is like it feels so substantial and singular. And this wasn't the goal of covering the game. The goal of covering the game was like enough intense linear games. Let's play something that's a little more just like doofy. But like, of course, there's like endless depth to this like seemingly doofy game. Like it's, I mean, I don't know why I'm calling it doofy, but it's like,
I know what you mean. It just doesn't feel like
it goes Wave Race,
quote unquote serious game like Ocarina of Time and like fucking
Resident Evil. And you gotta uncover what's in the mansion.
I haven't actually like tested this theory, but I can just imagine like playing with my 6-year-old nephew and showing him,
would love it.
Showing him, you know, GoldenEye and just being like, this is dated and just like bad kind of, you know? And like same with, you know, I'm sure a million other games. Ocarina is too slow and complicated.
Even Ocarina, I think,
way too slow and way too like, what is this? This is boring and stupid. And I still think Wave Race just has, it's like a time capsule where you just like, it just like immediately grabs you and you're like, holy shit.
I want to go back to like what I was sort of banging on about before. It's like, I care about vehicle-based gaming. No, and like it doesn't like it's not like a viable format really, or like maybe it's like it's not a viable format because like it was figured out and like there wasn't more iteration. Like Nintendo, Shigeru Miyamoto famously is like, we're not making another F-Zero. There's nothing interesting to do.
Oh my god.
Yeah, like he's literally said to interviewers like, well, what would you do to make it more interesting?
Oh my
Like,
god,
it's like they
he's so
just-
toxic.
He's a freak who wants to like
yeah.
make a theme park.
Yeah.
But the point is that like I don't think the actual conclusion is like we nailed it with Wave Race. I think it's like there are games that do celebrate like purity of locomotion, and like there's a game that that we've talked about with friends called like Lonely Mountain Downhill.
Oh yeah.
It's like a bicycle
Bacon
game.
posted that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They're putting a skiing game out. Like there are still
I need to
these
check those
like
out. Yeah.
they kind of do carry the torch of like complexity of locomotion and like honestly, like I think those games are like significantly iterated up. Like there is some lineage between Wave Race 64 like and those games. And I'm not just saying like those are the ones. I'm just saying like I think to take seriously like pure locomotion with a vehicle and a person on a vehicle is still like a very special, very dense, very demanding game design concern. I think that's part of it too, is that like it's not just about level design. It is like almost entirely about like how's
it feel?
Every single interaction feel. Like
totally.
Most games are just like you go.
Yeah.
Like, and it matters. Like feeling and animation matter, but like it's rare that a game like Wave Race 64 or Lonely Mountains Downhill comes along.
And that's why earlier I mentioned Rocket League. I know that it's a very different type of game, but it's not a coincidence that everyone who's played Halo loves the fucking Warthog, right? And Unreal Tournament, those games. But I don't remember the exact story, so I might be butchering it, but I'm pretty sure that people who developed what's the name of the original Rocket League game? It's like super acrobatic rocket supercars or whatever.
Yeah.
The people who worked on developing that games also had like a vehicle, mod company and worked on like Unreal Tournament vehicles and Halo vehicles and all this shit. And I'm like, these are like, they fucking mastered vehicles, working on these humongous AAA games. And then eventually we're like, we're so fucking good at this, we're going to make our own goddamn game. And that's really like the story. And
dude.
Yeah, Rocket League.
I mean, we're way off.
Game.
We're way off course now, but truly like one of my favorite game experiences in the world is there's still standing these like Unreal Tournament 2004 servers, which are vehicle based like platforming challenges essentially. And it's like
that's awesome.
Players have made endless like racetracks kind of, but they're like platforming racetracks, and you gotta just like and you can rotate your car in the y-axis way that we're talking about, and like shit, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like there's plenty of fun to be had with maneuvering vehicles in a video game.
Surfing and Counter-Strike, forget about it.
That shit's crazy.
Yeah,
that shit feel crazy.
Yeah, I think Gil's game has a lot of that going on.
Goblin.
Maybe, yeah.
President.
Well, a future guest on the pod, we'll see. But maybe we should wrap it up pre 2 hours if that's even possible. Every time we sit down, I'm
game
like,
club.
There's not that you were even saying before we hit record, like this will be a different one. This is a weird one. In my head, I was like, maybe it's just a clean hour. This game fucking rocks. And 2 hours later, here we are. But
what else?
We're gonna do a poll for the next Game Club game. I mean, by the time this is out, the poll will already be finished. But whatever.
The Japanese. That's true.
That's true. Sad but true.
Hey, gamers, thanks for voting in the poll. Get ready
job.
Get ready for
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle video game 2024.
Let's get out of here.
Let's get out of
games. Here. Happy gaming.
Happy gaming to the Wide Flank world.
It'll be a good luck, have fun for whatever the next Game Club game is. Don't know which
Indiana Jones.
This
and the Great Circle video game 2024.
Cool. Yeah. And happy holidays and shit. I don't know.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye bye.
Play My suggestion for holiday gaming is Snowboard Kids.
Snowboard Kids. Check it out.